Hi there, and welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to take you through most of my music software. I'm going to be doing this inside of Cubase Pro 13. I started off with Cubase VST 3.5, and that actually predates 1 in this series. That's 1998. Then I moved up to VST 5, and then SX1 came out, and that's where we're at in this numbering system. So here we are. I'm just going to choose my master template here. Alrighty, here we are inside the template, and I'm going to go over the template first. I'm going to index this episode so you can just find what you're looking for. On this page here, you'll see essentially my template. If you've ever seen the studio from the front-facing view, you know there's two more monitors, one on this side and one on that side. They're both 27 or 28-inch monitors. On the monitor on this side, I have some plugins automatically loaded into Cubase on the master output, on the stereo output. And that's the PAS Analyzer, Waves L2, and the Audio Performance Monitor from Cubase. Also, just a notepad. I take lots of notes on every project that I do, what key it's in, if there's tempo changes, all kinds of notes. If it's pop, then I'll often put the lyrics in here. And if I'm using any hardware instruments and what their settings were, I'll put those in here. As far as the instruments actually in the project in Cubase, I don't need to document those because they're already part of the project. Up here at the top of the template, I have markers, and I have 7 to start with. And these correspond to colors on my Stream Deck that I can get to them automatically. I also use 2 iPads, an iPad Pro and a smaller iPad, running Touch Portal to get me around inside Cubase and to automate my workflow. Lots of macros in here like do-over and others. There are up to 30 markers here that I can use. And I'm a one Cubase project per film project. Generally, I like everything in one Cubase project because with a massive template like this, it's already a gigabyte. And that's a lot of space. And if I use just one Cubase project for every cue, I'm looking at least a gigabyte for every cue. And that's a lot of storage space. Below that, we have time signature, and it defaults to 4/4, or that's where I have my template set. Currently working on a project that starts in 3/4, goes to 4/4, goes back again to 3/4, and then back again to 4/4. It's kind of crazy. Then tempo track. I love using tempo to fudge time. So if you have a hit point that you need to land on, you can speed up or slow down the tempo a little bit. Usually if it's not too much, the user's not really aware of it. And if it's part of a crescendo in the action anyway, it's basically par for the course. Here we have chords and structure. Although these are MIDI tracks, it says, I just use them for block text. I like to see the chords. It helps me to remember what I'm playing to, and I can visualize the music in my head and also see the chord progression here. And the structure for pop, it might be intro, verse 1, verse 2, chorus. And for score, then it's probably going to be movement 1, movement 2, movement 2A, that kind of thing. I have 2 video tracks. I used to only have 1 video track, but today with the rapid pace, sometimes there's not picture lock and you get a scene and it overlaps with another scene and you're not sure where one ends and where they're going to cut it and where the next one's going to start. And this is true in just indie shorts. A lot of times they're in a real hurry because they want to enter their short film in some competition. So I found it's just better to have 2 video tracks. And then here we're down in the real meat and potatoes. There's a click track here. And I should tell you that this template, the first version of it was created by Spitfire Audio by Christian Henson, and another gentleman from his organization created this for BBC Symphonic Orchestra. And I just modified it to my purposes. I took these stems down here and then just changed them around. And I have BBC in here because I actually own that product, but I've heavily modified this template. The click track they have here, so what you do is you'd essentially mute all of them except for the quarter note, and then you get a quarter note click. And then if you need an eighth note click, then you'd have both the quarter note and the eighth note click unmuted, because the eighth note click here is just another quarter note click on the offbeat. And then there's also triplet time if you need it. Personally, I just use the metronome that's in Cubase. That works for me. I'm going to start with the orchestral. Let's just take a look at the winds here. So these are the Woodwinds, and these are the orchestras I have. So I have Spitfire Symphony Orchestra Pro, Spitfire BBC Symphonic Orchestra Woodwinds, Spitfire Albion 1 Woodwinds, Native Instruments Woodwinds Ensemble, Native Instrument Woodwind Solo, East-West Woodwinds, East-West Opus Woodwinds. Now I think these two are probably the same. When I upgraded to Opus, it probably has a little bit more content in there. East-West Solo Woodwinds, and those are pretty good. And then East-West Fantasy Woodwinds, and I recently purchased that. So if we open up one of these folders, generally the way I organize it is from highest pitch to lowest pitch, with a few variations in there. So you'll see piccolo, then flute, then oboe. But if there's variations on an instrument, like there is for the flute, you have down here, you have an alto flute, and you have a bass flute, and this bass flute is going to be a lower pitch than the oboe. But I've grouped it in with the flutes because that works for me. Then we have oboe, clarinet, and at the bottom we have bassoon, contrabassoon. In some of these libraries you have a masse, which is just a fancy way of saying a composite instrument, where they take all the instruments and they spread them across the entire keyboard. Obviously they got to decide where one ends and another one starts, because most of these instruments overlap, at least in some portion. And so what they'll do is they'll kind of crossfade the instruments at a specific level. So it's a very smooth transition between all the instruments. And this can be very helpful. I use masses less in woodwinds and a lot more in strings. I'll write a whole ostinato string part or some string orchestration using both hands, and then I'll parse out the parts to the different tracks for the individual instruments, and then edit them further from there. So all of these appear just like that, and all the different instruments are in here from these libraries, I should say, articulations. And Spitfire Albion 1, usually I would say a library like this that's been out a long time may not be relevant anymore, but I still find Albion 1 very useful. Not necessarily for the woodwinds, but for the strings and the brass. There's a few sounds in there that I'll highlight as I go through today and tell you about. One thing I would say about Albion 1 is when I purchased it, it was $449. I think that's probably unrealistic these days with the glut of sample libraries out there, and the fact that you can probably buy the East-West Opus library for less than that. The Native Instrument Woodwinds Ensemble Solo. I don't use these Native Instrument Woodwinds. They're here, and they're all itemized, and I think I might have used them once or twice, but rarely. They're part of the complete collection, which I own, so I just put them in here because they may be useful one day. The East-West Woodwinds, the Opus, the Solo. I have used the Solo here. I haven't really used the East-West Woodwinds, but obviously I have them, and there's ton of articulations in here. So they could be very useful. And I know some people love them. Then East-West Fantasy Woodwinds. You're going to get penny whistles, so you have these Irish whistles and Uilleann pipes and Renaissance flutes, Renaissance if you live in Europe. They can be very useful, and I only recently got this library and I'm getting used to it. Let's take a look at the brass. So we're going to see a lot of the same names repeated, but just for brass here. So we have Spitfire Symphonic Orchestra Professional, the BBC brass, the Albion 1 brass, and I'm going to just highlight a couple of instruments from Albion 1. The NI brass I don't use, or the session horns. The East-West brass, very powerful. One thing I'll say about the orchestras I use, my go-to orchestra is Spitfire Symphony Orchestra Professional. That's what I prefer. Giving it a kind of a synthesizer terms, I find it warmer and more organic and analog, and I find BBC Symphonic Orchestra somewhere between that and East-West. East-West is powerful, it's really big, it's a little shrill and brittle sometimes, and so I don't use it as much as I use the Orchestra Pro from Spitfire Audio. I just find it a prettier sounding orchestra. Then we have the East-West Hollywood Pop Brass. Now this is different. This is more for jazz ensembles, pop music, modern jazz. And you have a lot of just regular notes. So you have your sustains and shorts, and you have effects. And there's a lot of phrases as well that can be very useful if you're not good at articulating brass. Not only that, is when it's all part of one sample, it just sounds more natural. And the fantasy brass alpenhorns and whatnot. Yeah, flugelhorns, Wagner tubas. And there's a lot of great stuff in here. So what I do find is I mix and match orchestras. And some people say, oh, you can't do that. They're recorded in different spaces. To me, that's a bunch of crap. I've done tons of work and created tons of cues and songs, and nobody ever told me, oh, those two instruments sound like they're from different orchestras. Nobody can tell in a mix. Trust me on that. So sometimes when I want some extra power in the brass and I'm using Spitfire Symphonic Orchestra Pro, I'll go to BBC Symphonic Orchestra, or even sometimes to East-West. Some very powerful French horns in BBC Symphonic Orchestra. So a lot of good stuff in there. Let's skip percussion for now and we'll go to the strings. And here, once again, you'll see a lot of the same suspects here. We have Spitfire Symphony Orchestra Professional, some really great sounding strings in there, very warm sounding. The BBC Symphonic Orchestra strings, I do want to talk about these. When I first downloaded and played Violins 1 and Violins 2, I was disappointed. I find them phasey and noisy. They have this kind of a sound at the top of it. And that's not a really good rendition, but if you own this library, maybe you know what I'm talking about. I can't be the only person that just finds them very noisy. The violas, not so much, and the celli are great. I often steal the celli from BBC Symphonic Orchestra and use them with Symphony Orchestra Pro because they're really grindy. They're great for arco, especially in the lowest octave of the celli. They really sound powerful. And when I'm looking for that, I'll mix and match. But the violins, not a fan. I don't know what happened there. Maybe I'm off my rocker and you can tell me in the comments. Spitfire Albion 1, strings. I love these. I just think this is a great library. The concertinos, the not necessarily the tremolo, but the longs, they're so beautiful and warm. And of course, these are Masses. They're across the entire keyboard. So they're, your orchestrating possibilities are more limited, and you don't get a whole bunch of articulations. The Caleño, the pits are great, but I really want to talk about my favorite, and it's the spiccato and the short combo. The spiccato are just bright, but they're still warm. They're incredibly punchy. They're great for ostinatos. You should be writing your own ostinatos. Don't use canned ostinatos in products like Opus. You're never going to get better as a composer. But these are some beautifully great spiccato strings. And now the short combo here, and I'm going to use a British accent on a couple of the words because it just sounds better. The spiccato and staccato combo, and that's what this is here. Half the players are playing spiccato, half of them playing staccato. You get just a little bit more time of the bow on the string. And so what I would say is for really intense orchestral music, the short spiccato is just beautiful. For something that's a little bit more romantic comedy, the short combo here, that works incredibly well. If you've watched the video that I put out, 10 almost cues I wrote, the very first one is called Hampton's Wedding Day. And I used this combo for that. Just because the orchestration possibilities are less doesn't mean I can't use it, and it sounds great. And then there's just some things here to save on memory. You got your 8-ves and for your low, and anyway, for longs and shorts. But I really like Albion 1 strings for this particular purpose, and I kind of didn't talk about Albion 1 in the brass up here. Let me just go back up here because I did miss something. I want to talk about the nasty brass. And it's this one right here. I'm just not used to using a cursor this big. This is just crazy. The low, long, nasty. This one right here. I'm just going to highlight it. It's just got a really good growl to it. It's great for accenting a point and it just holds beautifully and to make your point. So what else do we have in the strings here? We have the NI stuff again. It's well recorded. I don't have any complaints about it. The action strings are a lot like Opus, all those kind of riffs that are in there that you can use. And if you're not necessarily a musician or you're short on time, it can be helpful, but I don't use them. The solo strings are what I use for. This is one of the few libraries I use from Native Instruments that I absolutely love. And it's the solo strings. The Stradivari violin is a little screechy, but I like it. The Guarneri, and I'm not even sure if I'm pronouncing that correct, violin is beautiful. That's really great. The viola is very nice. It's got that boxy goodness of viola that can be either people hate it or love it. By itself, it can sound a little boxy and sometimes a little nasally, but in an ensemble, in a quartet, perfect. And my absolute favorite, the Stradivari cello. This is just a beautiful cello. Very classic style, super fast on reacting. I have my CPU and my computer working overtime. The latency, I have it really, really low, like 7 milliseconds. And, that causes problems when I have a really dense mix down and I have to lengthen it or it just won't do it, especially when I have a lot of tempo changes. But for when I'm actually composing, I like it as short as possible. And this reacts beautifully. It boots up in the virtuoso mode. Not that I'm a virtuoso, but it just works great. The famous Bach piece that you often see people playing on YouTube, solo cello, it's beautiful for doing that. And I was going to demo it and play that for you, but the video is going to be way too long if I do stuff like that. but you should definitely check that out if you're in need of a solo cello. Moving on, the east-west strings, very nice, very powerful, lots of epic sound in there. The solo strings are really nice too. I prefer the native instruments cello a little bit more, but there's some pretty nice solo strings in here. The violin and the cello are pretty nice. Cinesamples, Tina, Gao or Guao, I don't know exactly how to say this, my apologies. There's good and there's bad to this library, and I'm going to give you the good first. It's a beautiful, round, warm sound, and it's very, very usable for melody, and that's how I've used it. I have a few complaints about it. The first complaint is no matter how low I set the latency on my interface and in Contact, it still just lags. And I think that's because of the way they wrote the legato for it. I'm not sure if they use true legato or it's all being done under the hood with, algorithms and whatnot. But it's just not as good as it could be as far as responsiveness. And that really detracts from when I'm trying to write something at a rapid tempo and moving through the notes very quickly. It just seems to lag. The other thing that I don't like about it is it's only 3 octaves. Even the cello family on the strings in most of these libraries, on all of these main libraries here, I think for most it's 3 octaves and a minor 7th. So that's 10 notes that we're missing on the top end from Tina's cello. Now, I'm sure it's not her doing. I don't know. Maybe I bought the cheap budget version of this sample library. I don't know. But I didn't get the whole range. And it's just, or maybe they just didn't record. Maybe they thought 3 octaves was enough. But it's not. And so that's restricting some of my melody possibilities. And that's why I'll go back and I'll use Native Instruments cello for that, or even sometimes East-West. If you have BBC Symphonic Orchestra, there's a leader instrument where they have the mic that's next to the leader of that particular family of instruments. And that kind of makes it like a solo, but there's still bleed through from the rest of the ensemble. So not perfect. But anyway, this cello here could be so good. The fantasy strings, really good. I'm glad I have this. Hardinger fiddles, lutes. I mean, if you need to write some minstrel type stuff, or for fantasy orchestra, this stuff is beautiful and very well done. Let's go back up to the percussion. So up here, BBC Symphonic Orchestra has percussion. The Symphonic Orchestra Pro library doesn't have percussion, but BBC Symphonic Orchestra does. It's all individual hits, and there's a pretty decent selection in here, which are pretty cool. Then here we have Albion One's percussion, and I have used this, and I do use it occasionally. There's some really nice individual hits in here. Easter Island and XXL Percussion has some really nice hits. The cymbals and gongs are excellent. Everything from the Sultan's Palace to something a little smaller like East meets West. And the tams and gongs down here are really nice too. Some really useful samples in there. Spitfire drum line. I bought this for $29 and they gave me a $10 off coupon. So I turned around and bought their choir library as well for $19, and we'll get to that in a little while. This is really good for writing drum line material. I've never been in a drum line, and I read some reviews and people said, oh, it doesn't have this and it doesn't have that. I've used it to create cues, and it works fine for me. If you need to write some John Philip Sousa type stuff, I think you'd be fine with this. And I've got other libraries as well to supplement it, of course. NI Percussion, some great stuff in here. Action Strikes is really good. Kinetic Metal, I like that. Mallet Flux. This sample library is kind of overused. If you've watched any PBS special about swans or migrating birds, you probably heard Mallet Flux. Vital Mallets, I think those were free. Rise and Hit, this is really good, and you can sync the points within the rise and the hit to your tempo, which is beautiful. India is great, Middle East is great, and East Asia is amazingly good. A lot of these libraries have loop-driven type rhythms. I think they're MIDI-based loops. They're not sampled loops. They're MIDI-based loops, and you can extract those loops to Cubase or your DAW if you know how to do that. It's not super easy, but it can be done. VIR2, I think these were free, and I downloaded them. You know, you get on their mailing list, and they go, hey, go pick up some free stuff. So I did. NI Symphony series, I've got this stuff. I don't use it. NI Soundscapes, these are good. Now, you might say, didn't you just do your first rant and just whine about how Arcus and, you know, Mysteria, Stray Light, and Ethereal Earth, and all this stuff is just derivative crap? Yes, I did. Which is why I don't think the upgrade path on Native Instruments Complete is a good value. But as far as doing a one-time purchase of Complete and getting a lot of the stuff that I have, it's worth having. Arcus, I haven't really used. Cloud Supply, I've used. Evolved Mutations 2, I've used, is pretty cool. Thrill is good for sound design, and I was helping somebody do some sound design. It's not really stuff I like to do, but Thrill is one of those interfaces where you have two separate sounds, and then you can move on a square piece in one direction towards the other, one side or the other, and make it louder by going up and down. Mysteria is basically the same thing, as there are a lot of these things, but Mysteria uses voices to do it. Watching from England, and you've ever seen an old series called Children of the Stones, you would recognize this kind of stuff. It's scary as heck. So some really good stuff there if you're in sound design. Ethereal Earth is really nice. That brings us to one of my favorite libraries, and it's Hevio City's Damage 1, and I guess there's two libraries, Damage 2. I was really glad when they came out with Damage 2, because Damage 1 doesn't have any triplet beats. There's a lot of content in here. It syncs to the tempo of your DAW, and you can change the tempo without affecting the sound or the sound quality. And this is just two great libraries. And I think if you're a composer out there making money, and why would you be watching my channel? But if you are, my guess is you already have Damage 1 and Damage 2. These are just amazingly good libraries. The beats on them are just awesome. Damage 2 was nice when I got it because it has these triplet beats. You were able to create triplet beats in Damage 1, but you had to Frankenstein the straight time beats. And this includes both straight time rhythms and triplet rhythms. And then there's also single hits and some single loops down here that you can use to blend in with some of the other loops to create all kinds of craziness. Even though these are loops and there's only so many combinations, so to speak, there's so much that you can do with them if you get creative. I don't think you'll ever run out of possibilities. East-West Percussion is really quite good. There's a lot of instruments in here, and if you need something that's just a little bit, unusual, you might find it in here. You got triangles and sleigh bells and crotales and brake drums and all kinds of stuff. Drum machines, I don't have a ton in here. Addictive Drums, because it's one of the first drum machines I bought. Then Battery 4. Battery comes with Cubase, it's free. It's not really a drum machine because it's just slots where you put drum sounds and then you trigger those from your timeline here. So basically Cubase makes it a drum machine. Then everything from Moonbeats down to this one right here. These are all drum machines that came with Native Instruments Complete. Moon kits I haven't used, or Drum Lab. Butchvig drums, very punchy drums, but I don't really have a lot of use for them since I have Addictive Drums. Machine, I haven't really used that. I have used Modern Drummer, and these do have beats, these drum machines, and they're really good. Some good sounding punchy drums down in here. Fantasy Percussion, you got all these items here, and some unusual items, so they can be very useful. So that's it for percussion. Let's take a look at the keys next. There's not a ton of stuff in here. Retro Machines Mark II. I really like this product. It's great for writing 80s, 90s type stuff. If you want to write stuff that's older sounding, it works really well. It'll also do modern stuff, and you can see it says JP, and here it says Matrix. So it's based on samples from those machines, and it's a sample-based synthesis machine. And each one of these patches here has actually 8 patches in it. And number 8 is always an arpeggiated rhythm. And you can make them all arpeggiated if you want, all 8 of them, because there's an arpeggiator in the interface. And it's not particularly deep, but it's usable. It has up, down, maybe down. It has random. And it's not bad. And like I said, I've used these. There's some nice, warm sounding analog pads, some great lead sounds, lots of sweeps. It has an interface that you can use to edit the sounds, and you get controls that you would recognize, like filter cutoff and resonance and an LFO and LFO depth and all those kind of parameters. But it's sample based, very much like the XV series from Roland, XV88. But not as many parameters as the XV88. Here are the NI guitars and basses. A lot of these have both a melody and a pattern version. So the melody version, if you've watched my episode on how to play nylon string guitar or guitar on keyboards, I did a nylon string version. And this is the instrument I was playing. It's a really good instrument, beautiful sounding, nice and warm. And then the nylon patterns, there's lots of different picking, strumming patterns in all of these different electric and acoustic instruments. And then there's basses, and some of these basses have patterns as well. And very nice, good sounding stuff. And I'm glad I have it. I mean, I play guitar, but I never ever call myself a guitar player. But these are great. And when you're down for a crunch, setting up a guitar and the cabinet takes time. Here, you got the sound, put it in a mix, it sounds great. And these are great sounds. NI Ethnic, you have Cuba. In Cuba, you get a piano, a bass, a trace, which is a very... a tray is a weirdly tuned guitar, and then you also get a trumpet. On the piano, there's actually some rhythms. You get some salsa rhythms and some other Latin rhythms. Very, very cool stuff. If you listen to the Frames episode that I published, I think I published a little bit of 2 pieces. And the first one is called the Cuba Connection. And I used one of the piano riffs from Cuba on that. India is really good. Middle East, West Africa, East Asia, some very nice stuff in here. There's also some Japanese and Korea. So here, harp, just show you there's a couple of different harps. I've got the BBC Symphonic Orchestra harp, and then there's one in East-West Opus. And those are some really nice harp samples. BBC Symphonic Orchestra Celeste. Pianos, I'll take just a look in here. Piano is very personal to people. I like it bright and strident, which is why I love Keyscapes Rock. The giant piano, I like it in the XXL mode, and I have used that on cues. The Maverick's a cool piano. The Grandeur is what I call the everyday grand, the generic grand, and I mean that in the nicest way because it's just a beautiful, simple, it's got enough brightness to it, not as bright as the Keyscape Rock, but bright enough that it's good for rock, it's good for pop, it's good for blues, country. The Gentleman is an upright, kind of stout, and I did another episode where I went through my piano libraries and gave them scores. The Noir, not really a fan of the piano. I use it mostly for the particle engine sounds. Alicia Keys, love her music. Don't like this piano. Never used it. It's dead. Doesn't matter how hard you hit it, tone doesn't change. Some Scarby stuff, clavinet and whatnot. The Cuba appears in here. Una corda, the felt, the cotton. Personally, I just like the pure. I've never really understood the marketing behind, oh, you've got to have a felt piano. And, okay. I think that was probably 5 or 10 years ago. I think most people are over that fad now. White Grand Chapel was one of the very first pianos that I ever owned. Then we have East-West 4 pianos. I really just wanted to buy the C7, but I think it was like about $80. But all 4 pianos were $212 or something like that. So I thought, I'll just buy all 4. And quite honestly, I don't like them. They're not for me. The C7 was very disappointing for me. Not bright enough, not strident enough. The Steinway sounds like it's been compressed within an inch of its life. Same thing about the Bosendorfer. The best piano for my taste here is the Bechstein, but I probably wouldn't use it on anything. I'd go to the Grandeur or something from Keyscape. So that's the pianos I own. Next up, NI synths and keyboards. There's not a lot in here. Arcus, analog strings. Most of this stuff is from the complete collection. Vintage organs. Modular icons, it's okay. FM8, as much as I love the DX7, and I'll tell you that in all the DX7 videos that I've done, I don't use that sound on anything anymore. Massive X and Super 8 are mostly what I use when I need synth sounds and I want them to come out of Cubase, and I'm using these plugins. And they cover a lot of the bases. If you followed the channel, I have hardware. I have an AX80, a Juno 106, a Poly 800. I'm not short on analog sounds, but those sounds are good enough. Also, the Kronos and the XV88 have some great sounding analog. It's virtual, but it sounds really good. The Albion Steam Engine, it's kind of like the NI derivative crap. They just took the sounds, like the strings, the brass, and they created an engine that, will make percussive rhythms. And, it's a really cool engine. And I think as an added extra for free, Jeff sampled instruments. There's a lot of stuff down here that's sampled. So I have my bass sound from the 106. I have several different bell tones because I like bells that you can play diatonically, and a lot of bell sounds in orchestral libraries, they're not tuned very well. I mean, that's just the way they are. And when you want bells like that for like clangorous church tones, like ringing bells, that's fine. But when you want something more melodic for pop, country, or even for orchestral music, I'd much rather prefer these bells. And they've been sampled off of the DX7, the Wave Station, and the Kronos. Shine On, Scar Lemaire, and the Screamer. All 3 of these came from the Alesis QS series. If I need these sounds, I'll actually record the real sound from either the QS7 or QSR, which I own. I also own a QS6. But these are good placeholders so that I can have it play the sound. The thing about these sounds is on some of them, especially Shine On, there's velocity information going to the filter. and it just doesn't sound the same as the hardware. And there's some other instruments in here. I have chiptune, and I gave this away. It's on Piano Book. If you want it, you can go get it from there. Kronos Classic Choir, it's just a placeholder. Jump, stand back sound, scat voices. That's actually multi-sampled every major second, and it's multi-velocity sample too. It's a pretty good sample. Then ISO monoliths. I was putting a bunch in here and I just stopped because I didn't really need any more sounds. A friend gave me like 30 CD-ROMs, sample sounds that were supposed to be loaded into the Roland S760 series and the S550 series. And I just took them and I ran them through Chicken Translator. I was an early adopter of Chicken Systems Translator. I don't get anything by telling you that. It's a great product. It converts just about any sample format to any other sample format. I think the first year they came out, I bought it, and it was a perpetual license. So I've gotten upgrades for like 15, 20 years, however long I've had it. So that's been really cool. And I just put some things in here. Roland monoliths, I think a lot of these came from those discs as well. And there's some useful stuff in here, like Rainy Day, that has thunder and lightning on it. And it's a useful sound effect for some songs, and I've used it. Used it in a cue called Rainy Day 5. Synth hardware, this is just a list of my synths down here. So if I have them coming in, I'll put the MIDI information down here. Some of these may not be in the studio anymore. They may be under beds because I thinned out a lot of my studio gear when I did my studio tour. Next up, voice. There's Choir Omnia. This is a really good choir. I got this while I was doing my review on the choir libraries that I owned, and I don't think I'd really given a really good review on it because I hadn't used it much, and I've used it quite a bit now, and it really sounds good. And you have 4 individual sections. You have sopranos, altos, tenors, and basses, and that way you have all those orchestrating possibilities. The Contact Factory library has got some pretty good sounds in it. I think this might be their Library 2 version, and I think they might have stolen some content from Choir Omnia because I think that's an NI product. Aries Hybrid Choir Designer. I'm not really a fan of this. It's got some interesting sounds. And if I was doing more film and TV work type stuff, I would say this would be very helpful. There's a lot of nice textures in here that would be good for underscore. The thing is, if you're wanting to orchestrate all 4 sections of a choir, excluding a voice choir from that, just saying sopranos, altos, tenors, and basses, you don't get that here because if I remember correctly, the women, the altos, and the sopranos are a composite, and the tenors and the basses are a composite. So it's not as useful. East, West, Opus, Hollywood Choir. This is a great choir library. I have to admit that I don't use it probably as much as I should, and mostly because I have a favorite we'll get to in here in just a moment. But it's got some really great sound, very powerful sounds. When I want something epic, I go to East, West. When I want something a little bit more subtle, I'll go to my favorite, which is Voxos. And Voxos 2. Voxos 2 is a good value because you get the 4 individual sections, your sopranos, altos, tenors, and basses, and you also get a boys choir. And there's a solo boy in here and a solo soprano. And the legacy one, I think, is the one that has a ton of vibrato on it. And you can't take it off. And that just reminds me a lot of my mom when she would sing. She couldn't take vibrato off of her voice. And that's my go-to choir library. Spitfire Epic Choir. Once again, I got this for $19 because I got a $10 off coupon. It's only $29. If you're doing orchestral work, it would work in a pinch. If you needed something for pop, it's really good quality. and it would be more than enough for pop, because you probably wouldn't be doing a lot of orchestrating of the individual families. So you have sopranos and altos combined, and tenors and basses, and then you have essentially the same articulations in each and so on and so forth. And then there's some extra stuff down here. It's really very good for $29. The quality is really good. Native Instruments, Factory Choir. This is really good too. The morphing vowels is really, really good. There's some problems with something under the hood in this, and I was having a ton of problems when I was using it on a project, and I went looking to see if other people had been having those problems. And I can't even remember what it was now, but I was morphing them in real time using controller information, and it would mess up on me all the time. And other people had the same problem. I don't think they ever fixed that, which is a shame. Let's see, what else do we have here? East West, Voices of Passion. I'd like to say nice things about it, but I was disappointed. I think Syria, India, Bulgaria are okay. There's some chanting in here, which is really good. If you're scoring something like Black Hawk Down, it could be useful. But I was hoping in Wales there might be some voices to the level of, say, Chevanai, and they don't have that. So that is unfortunate, because the quality of the voices here just aren't that good. I mean, the demo is really good. The demo is very seductive, but when you get the library, it's ho-hum. There's better stuff out there, and I've covered some of it already, and I'm going to cover some more stuff in a moment. Halion choirs, just because it comes free with Cubase, I pulled out a few textures that I found interesting, and one day I'll use them on a cue. East West Hollywood backup singers. Absolutely love this. A library like this, the weakness in it is at some point there's just not enough phrases, not enough content to keep finding something fresh. And maybe that's fine, because people are listening to different songs and they don't know what you've done in the past. But I feel like I'm always going for the same crossfades, the ooh, this one right here with the Leslie on it. And this one just, is excellent. It just sounds really good. And some great singer voices there. Just really, really good. Chevanai, my absolute favorite female voice. This woman has just got an amazing voice. The legato. I know a lot of people don't get past the 5 vowels, and that's unfortunate. And I'll probably flash up on the screen the other vowel, the other stuff, the other material. The panel you'll see is just my control panel on one of my iPads that I created for controlling it. That other material is so important for you to use. But I understand if you can't get past the first 5 vowels, the O, the A, the E's, the O's. They're just so beautiful. You don't really need much more than that. But there's also spoken phrases, whispers, very nice. East-West opera. This grew on me. When I first got it, I was like, the soprano's pretty good. But the tenor, so the soprano's a female, the tenor's a male voice. I was like, it's not that good. But it really grew on me after a while. The voices are really good. There's a lot of phrases in here. You get oohs, ahs, e's. You have some choices. Yes, they do sound opera-ish so something like Chevanai and some other soloist voices would be better for other purposes, like maybe in a cue for something that's film and epic. But when you need something that sounds like opera, these are great. The tenor doesn't sound Pavarotti enough for me. He just sounds a little wimpy, but Good enough. There are phrases, but they're sung in Italian, and my Italian's really weak these days, so I don't know what they're saying. East West Empire. This is a library that I like from day one. There's not necessarily a lot of straight ahead oohs and ahs, that kind of stuff. But there's some great kind of warbles, some melismas, and some weird phrases. And it's an unusual library, but when you need stuff like this is where you need to go. Vocalese 1, 2, and 3. I'll just cover these all together. And like I said, if you're really interested in vocal type sample library, you should definitely go and watch my sample library review of basically 90% of what you're seeing here. I give you how much they cost, how much they cost on sale, my scoring for them. Vocalese 1, 2, and 3. Not the most organic sounding voices, but it's not a choir voice. But there's so much great material in here. If you were interested in buying one of these libraries to try it out, buy number 3. It's got more content than 1 and 2 combined. It's a little more expensive. When I purchased it, it was $129, and 1 and 2 are $99. But it's worth spending the extra $30. Trust me on this. Here's all the content you get in this. You get these melodic phrases, you get intervals. There's 2 different female voices in here. I think it's Carla and Kristen. On some of the other ones, on 1 and 2, on one of those, I think it might be 1, there's as many as 5 different female voices that they used. Probably some of the best content on here are the pedals. And then when you mix them together and you play it as a chord, it's incredibly cool and hypnotizing. If you have one of these libraries, you probably know. Look at all the content in here. If you're asking me how long it took to put my template together, this template we're going through, hundreds of hours. I know I have hundreds of hours invested in this. Let's take a look at 2. This has a lot of content as well. And then there's 1. If you were scoring film or TV, especially if you were scoring a series, if this was right for that series, you would just have so much great material here. Vocalese 1, 2, and 3, I can't say enough good things about them, and I'm not being paid to say it. I really love these libraries. Next one up, Cinesample's Voices of War. I waited a long time before I purchased this. I thought, I don't need that. This is a great library. It's a really, really good library. I don't have a lot of stuff from Cinesamples. This is a great library. It's got some really great kind of throat singing, the whispers, the chants, the shouts. Some of this stuff is scary type shouts. It's very gritty and just low and growly. It has a good growl to it, a lot of it. If you've seen Game of Thrones, Dragonborn mix, come on, they basically stole that name. Maybe not, I don't know. But there's some just great stuff in here. I'm pretty sure I didn't have Voices of War when I did my big review. But this is a really great library. East-West Fantasy Voices. This comes in the East-West Fantasy Orchestra if you buy the entire suite. Originally, I was just going to buy the voices, but I'm so glad that I bought the entire suite. Claire Solo, I won't spend too long on this. This was a freeware or shareware type thing. It's only, I think, an octave. It's true legato. The female voices, if Chevanai is 100 on a scale of 1 to 100, this voice is like an 80. But it's a different texture, and sometimes I'll mix it in a low volume with other sounds that I use a lot, and it can kind of subtly change the texture. It's a little pitchy in some places. They didn't try to perfect a pitch, no auto-tune or anything, which is good because that's kind of par for the course. I think I paid a couple of dollars. You may still be able to find it on the internet, and I think you could get it for free. And it's a decent sounding, just single octave or thereabouts. Sound Iron Choirs and Vondria. I don't own these two libraries. I just put them down there to remind myself one day I might want to buy them. A friend has both of these libraries, and I've used them at his house. Sound Iron, you have Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus, and there are composites on the female side and composites on the male side. And I like individually orchestrating my tenors and basses and my sopranos and my altos. Vondria is a beautiful female voice. It sounds like it's contralto or maybe just pure alto, I'm not sure. Whereas Chevanai is soprano. And the two of those voices together, I did this one cue, love triangle. I did the love triangle cue with Chevanai, Vondria, and the male voice from opera. And that was pretty cool. That's it for the voice, and we're almost done here. Here's the recorded audio, and it's just 6 tracks of stereo and 6 tracks of mono, and they're coming in off of the input channel, I think from my preamp, my stereo preamp, and they're just there when I need them. And that's it. I know this was a long video, but hopefully you just went to the sections that you wanted to look at. And I don't have anything else to tell you except thanks for stopping by and watching the video. I really do appreciate your time. And I'll see you soon in another episode. Bye now.